why reparations are needed. Please receive them in that order. Reverend Washington Lee Park, and then Abdul Ali Muhammad.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Now listen, the flyer said that this is a revival. That means that you have to be alive while you're here. So accept this invitation from me right now to be revived while you're here. As Chris said, my name is Reverend Naomi Washington Lee Part, and I am delighted to serve this city as the Director for Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs in the Mayor's Office of Public Engagement. Let me just step up here so I can see. Let me start to frame our time together with a little story. I get my height, all 5 foot of me, from my mother. And I get my milk chocolate skin tone from my father. I inherited my name, Naomi, from my grandmother. I got my faith from the church mothers who raised me at Chapel Hill Missionary Baptist Church on the west side of Detroit. And my family, my ancestors, my loved ones also left me something that they probably never intended to leave me. Did you know that trauma runs in your blood? That trauma runs in households, in neighborhoods, in communities, among peoples. Here's the story. After 9/11, there were clinicians at the Icahn School of Medicine in Manhattan that offered to check anybody out who had been exposed to toxins. Remember the day? Remember the day? And among those who came to the medical school to be evaluated were 187 pregnant people. Mm-hmm. And they were, in shock, of course, and were at risk for developing PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They were experiencing nightmares and flashbacks and numbness, emotional numbness, for years after 9/11. And the question that the trauma team at the medical school wanted to investigate was, how will the fetuses be affected? These 187 pregnant people. Were the fetuses at risk? And so the clinicians monitored them, evaluated them, and then the babies were born. And they were smaller than usual. They were preemies. That was the first sign that the trauma of experiencing 9/11 had actually invaded the womb. 9 months after the babies were born, 38 of those now mothering people were evaluated during a wellness visit. And you know what they found? That not only did the mothers develop PTSD, which is signified by lower levels of cortisol, but the 9-month-old babies, they tested the saliva of the babies, and they also showed low cortisol levels. What does that mean? That there is confirmation that adverse experiences influence the next generation through epigenetic channels. In other words, you ain't got to live through it to live with the effects of it. Trauma leaves a trace in offspring even before they are born. Why am I telling you this story? Well, you know, when people found out we were doing a reparations revival, the question comes up. Why reparations? After all this time, why? Do we need to materially and spiritually repair what has been shattered? Why? Because trauma runs in the blood. Because we sit here today in 2022 with inheritances. Just like, you know, I get my height from my mama and my chocolate skin color from my daddy. Got my faith and my name from my grandmother. I have also inherited a history, a story, and that story contains some trauma. The trauma from slavery and its many, many afterlives. The residue still runs in my veins. And so reparations are needed. Now, here's what I found out when I did the research. Scientists have said, now listen, this adverse effect that starts in the womb doesn't have to be permanent. See, if I was preaching today. It's not a foregone conclusion that we live and then die with trauma unaddressed. That if you can, this is what the scientists have said, if you can reverse the context that brought forward the trauma, that led to the trauma, then you can reverse the impact of trauma on those who inherited it where? In the womb. So we're here today because we believe that things can change, that none of this is inevitable. Somebody say nothing is inevitable, except maybe what happens when people of love and justice get together and do. The inevitability of repair starts with us. That's all I wanted to say. To set the tone for our time together today. We have been denied repair. It's up to us to reverse what some might think is inevitable. So, do you want to be a reparations person today? I told y'all this is a revival. We are daily becoming reparations people. And we're here today to kick off a faith-based moral movement for reparations right here in the city of Philadelphia. So put your hands together. Put your hands together. Because we have all taken a faithful step toward becoming reparations people. I'm so glad that you're here today. I'm so grateful for the members of the Mayor's Advisory Commission on Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs for their leadership and vision in making this day happen. Now, I want you to do two things. One is stay awake. Stay awake. Secondly, a little later in the program, we're going to be inviting you to take a look at what you grabbed when you came in. This is how we will move forward together. So keep that handy, and we'll refer to that a little later on. All right? All right? Let's become reparations people together. Put your hands together. Put your hands together. I'm going to bring up my friend and brother and comrade, Abdul Ali Muhammad.
Hi, can y'all hear me? Hello, hello. Peace, peace. Stretch a little bit. I want to invite us all to take a breath together. take a few. Thank you, Reverend Naomi. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Lucy, and all the other organizers of this event. When we think about reparations, often we use a fixed example of what was promised. That promissory note that Martin Luther King talks about, that we be equal under the law, for example, or 40 acres and a mule, that was part of the Special Field Orders number 15. This wartime order has been morphed into the baseline for conversations about financial reparations, which I believe to be part of a larger reparative process. What is reparations? Is it a phantom wanting or a demand? Is it a question or a justice-oriented practice? Today you'll hear more about what it is or what it should be. Reparations to the descendants of enslaved Africans in the U.S. context is weighed by the vile history of being stolen and treated as cargo, bound and kidnapped and brought across the sea. As talked about in Slavery at Sea, a book by scholar Sawande Mustaqim. It's about labor extraction from our ancestors' bodies when they were alive, as it is about the desecration of their sacred remains in their afterlives. Scholar Dana Remy Berry calls this ghost values. In her book, The Price for Their Pound of Flesh. It's about experimentation and the unethical retention of our body parts put on display and without consent. It's about sexual violence enacted on us, generational uprootedness, and resource deprivation. So why should reparations matter in Philadelphia? Philadelphia was named after the Egyptian city of Philadelphia, which was itself named after the colonial rulers of Egypt, a brother and sister who were descendants of Alexander the Great's Ptolemy I, his son, Ptolemy II, and his daughter, Queen Arsinoe, married each other, even though they came from the same womb, hence brotherly love. Philadelphia was founded in 1682 and incorporated on October 25th, 1701. This land we are on is in fact Turtle Island and is Lenapehoking. Given that Philadelphia is the birthplace of our supposed post-colonial democracy, it only makes sense that with this comes harm. Given the history of white supremacy quilted into the fabric of every system within the US. From the experimentation and grave robbery done by Dr. Samuel George Morton and his collaborators, a Penn alumnus, Samuel George Morton, an early Penn physician, who filled the skulls of Black, Indigenous, and other people with lead shot, and often covered eye sockets with cotton. He did this to prove his theory of race science, that cranial capacity can prove rankings of intelligence. He ranked. Of course, the highest, he said, was Caucasian race, then Mongolian, then American, then Malay, then at the end, Ethiopian. To be clear, when Morton says Ethiopian, he means Black people. So to him, Black people had the smallest brain, and that meant that they were the least sophisticated race. His teachings influenced eugenics, the Confederacy, and medicine as we know it. Penn's violence continues as they have contemporaneously held remains of black children murdered by the state on May 13th, 1985. Again, Penn's violence, right, continues as they have contemporaneously held the remains of black children. Murdered by the state on May 13th, 1985. Penn continues this violence. Albert Kligman, a Penn dermatologist who experimented on prisoners at Holmesburg and had a Johnson & Johnson, patent as well. Beyond this, we are reckoning with hyper-displacement as the last vestiges of the Black Bottom are eviscerated by developers hungry for land grabs. Reparations, or the demand, is not fixed. The compounding harm is rooted in enslavement, but we cannot stop making the case there. In the archive, on shelves and private collections are overwhelming evidence of harm that has not been accounted for, and so too, these harms deserve repair. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. Good afternoon again. There we go. For those who are just joining us here and on Facebook Live, my name is Chris Norris. I'll be your MC for today. Coming up next, Soraya Nicole for a musical selection, and then right after that, we'll hear from Lucy Duncan, Hassan Bennett, and then a spoken word piece from our 2020 Poet Youth Laureate, Sidney Brown. Please receive them in that order.
How y'all doing today? Okay, that was like good. That wasn't bad, but we can like do that again. How are y'all doing today? Good. It's a new day, you know. This is Juneteenth weekend, you know what I'm saying? That's a big deal because a few years ago, we weren't celebrating this as, you know, it wasn't a huge celebration, and now we get to do this. Thank you all for being here. Once again, my name is Soraya Nicole, and anytime before I do any performance or any selection, I always love to do an affirmation, okay? So if you would like to, you can repeat after me, okay? I am light. I am whole. And I am here. Good, let's do that one more time, okay? I am light. I am whole. And I am here. Yes, okay, y'all ready for this performance? Okay. Shout out to DJ Aunt G. This song is called I Am Me. I wrote this song when I was going to the Philadelphia High School for the Creative and Performing Arts. Listen, I'm not the ordinary girl, eyebrows not on fleek. I'm not the curviest girl, I'm quite petite. I said quite, not quiet. Don't hold my tongue to speak between bumptuous and meek. Has silver lining in my mouth. I'm quick to say cheese, and riot been unleashed like a fro after transitioning days. Never had a perm straight, ends had to go astray, and like a fro, I am bold. I will remain and I just crave to be myself, cause I am worth more than gold. Now why extinguish thyself when you withhold a first class essence? For your presence is a blessing. Know that negative mentality, it gotta get the stepping. Gotta get the stepping, so stump it, squish it. It's a nug bug, take a glass of positivity. It's time to chug and ride the train. Be the conductor, lead the way, be the learner. Cause I can be, you are you. I am black, I am beautiful. I can be, you are you. I can black, so beautiful. I said I am me, and you are you, and we are beautiful. Yeah, I am me, and you are you. You're beautiful. Listen, turn up the sound because it's testimony time. I used to be the girl who despised the color of her eyes. Dread to wear my kinky hair, I straighten for disguise. Did you hear that? I said I straighten for disguise, so boys notice me more with silky hair. Wanted to be considered light-skinned or fair. I used to hide from the sun cause I believed they used to chase me. Honestly say I soak it and let it embrace me. My crown is round and I'm happy to be nappy. These kinks profound, I live in love with all around me. Look at my eyes, I see beauty, and I got my mother's eyes and they shimmer like jewelry. Had to uptrack the critique to better my physique. I learned to love myself, not in vain and conceit. I'm complete, I'm whole. When you view me, see my soul and wrote a scroll of my life. Here's the beauty and the strife. I am me. You are you. I am black. I am beautiful. I am me. You are you. I am black, so beautiful. I said I am me, and you are you, and we are beautiful. I am me, you are you, and we are black. Oh! Make some noise for yourself. Thank you. Can we do our affirmation one more time? Thank you guys so much. Thank you. I really received that. Let's do our affirmation one more time. I am light. I am whole. And I am here. God bless y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Jackie didn't tell me I'd need to be following that. Give it up for Soraya and Nicole one more time. Woo! So are you awake yet? Well, hopefully you'll be all the way awake by the time we're finished today. Whew. I want to start by invoking radical abolitionist Benjamin Lay, who is one of my favorite spiritual ancestors. He lived from 1682 to 759. He was a white Quaker who uncompromisingly called for the abolition of slavery and who was cast out of the Religious Society of Friends. He was cast out. He said, "It is true, some may say, Christ in his great love hath forgiven sins committed in time of great ignorance. But if we should commit the grossest of evils now, in the clear light of this gospel day, continue in them and plead for it too, our damnation would be just. I think of his words as we face climate catastrophe, as we face the whirling ramifications of white supremacy on this day. And if we ignore it, and if we cannot move to repair, our damnation would be just. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Quaker legacy of this city. There's a lot of myths going around, and I want to tell a little bit of truth. And I want to invoke Benjamin Lay's spirit. He was a radical truth teller, and may his spirit and words enliven our actions today. Quakers were the original colonizers of this land, perpetrating the theft of land from the Lenape, coming here, as many Europeans did, to escape persecution in England and establishing a colonial state in the process, a state built from trauma to enact trauma on so many. William Penn, who was gifted this stolen land from the King of England to pay a debt, was the first enslaver and trader in human bondage in Philadelphia. He brought 12 enslaved people from Barbados, where there were thousands of Quaker slaveholders, and he enslaved them, and he only manumitted some of them upon his death, and he did not treat them well. Quakers were instrumental in this city in creating the penitentiary system. Half of the committee who, in the name of reform, built the Walnut Street Jail, believing that if folks had quiet time all by themselves, they would become penitent, they built this jail. And that institution informed the building of Eastern State Penitentiary and the proliferation of that model around that country, and resulting in the horrifying incarceration levels of incarceration we have now. Dickens visited Eastern State Penitentiary, and he called solitary confinement torture then. In 1969, the National Black Economic Conference, which included SNCC members and Black Panthers, demanded from faith communities that they offer reparations. They wanted an easy win. And so they're like, well, let's try with the Quakers. They thought we would be an easy win. And Muhammad Kenyatta, Malcolm Kenyatta's grandfather, called on Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, of which this building is a part, to pay $5 million in reparations, starting with $500,000 as a first payment. Muhammad Kenyatta went on hunger strike, and individuals contributed only $5,000. Muhammad Kenyatta condemned the Quakers in this city. He said that they were dishonest about the history of racism among us. This demand invites response today. I want to talk a little bit about why I believe reparations is such a powerful tool. I believe in transgenerational healing, going forward and going back. I want to release my ancestors from the myths that we as white folks have told about them, and release them from the amber in which they are stuck. And perhaps, Reverend Naomi talked about epigenetics, perhaps epigenetics can work backwards. And we can heal our ancestors as we heal ourselves and as we heal in the present time. We can reverse the hurt and harm enacted and perpetrated across our lineages. We need, as Dr. Dave Ragland says, to turn our Quaker ghosts into real ancestors, into good ancestors, into ancestors. Reparations is also a tool that I have experienced releases bound energy. All that energy of when you're doing racial justice work, what do we do? What do we do? It's like, well, let's work at the root. What about a little reparations? And it releases bound energy to make things right for a thriving future. We're going to look back and heal and tell the truth so that we can look for it, and repair so that we can look toward a thriving future. It is the finest tool I know to abolish capitalism, and we all know that right now, that's what we need to do. Together, I believe we can do this, and it is time.
Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all feeling today? Can everybody hear me, or do I need to pick up the microphone? All right. So my name is Hassan Bennett. I'm from here in the city of Philadelphia. Hello. So she spoke about the prison system, the courts, and how they affect reparations. It affected me kind of differently than a lot of people in this room, maybe all of you. I was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to life in prison. I spent almost 12 to 13 years in jail for a crime I didn't commit due to police misconduct in the city of Philadelphia. Took them 2 trials to find me guilty. I was arrested in 2006. December 22nd, 2008, I was sentenced to life in prison. While in prison, I decided to get rid of all my lawyers on a stage called PCRA. This was 2014. December 19, 2014, I decided to put the power back in my hands. Now I want you to remember the word power, all right? I then went on to execute a plan, find evidence, and in 2016, I was granted what is known as an evidentiary hearing, where I had to stand against one of the most powerful forces in the country, arguably, the district attorney's office. Despite the evidence I put in my petition showing my innocence, they decided to continue to pursue and maintain their conviction. 2017, I was granted a new trial on about 9 counts. I filed about 10 issues. Out of those 10 issues, 9 was granted. And you would think a moral mind would say, okay, we're gonna let him out. Moral. They continued to pursue another conviction. 2018, I went in my first trial. It lasted about 2 weeks. The jurors deliberated for 5 days. They were hung. I went back to the prison kind of sad. Well, let down. Like, how could they do this? The evidence is clear. I didn't do it. It's phone records showing that I didn't do the crime. It's multitude of witnesses saying I didn't do the crime. It's witnesses saying another powerful force, the homicide division of Philadelphia, was beating them up and telling them you had to sign a release form to get out. That release form ended up being a statement, which they used to find me guilty. So I'm proving all this. 5 days after I was convicted, an article came out in the Philadelphia Daily News. It said, man representing himself nearly walks. The jurors split 11-1 in the favor of not guilty. A moral man would say, oh, we don't have any chance, let him go. Not the prosecution, not the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. They decided to continue to pursue their conviction. April 2019, I began my 4th trial. May 6th, the jurors deliberated for 81 minutes and found me not guilty. Now, I tell that story. A lot of people ask me to tell that story, and it applies in a multitude of ways. You could look at the determination, the fight, the execution, the refusal to be denied, and say, yeah, it's an inspiration, it's a motivational story. Or you could look at it as, whoa, what's wrong with our country? Today I'm going to say what's wrong with our country. Our country uses the court system as a tool to intimidate, threaten, and manipulate those of lower income, black and brown people, not just in the criminal. We could look through a multitude of arenas where the court is used to keep people they do not desire in position. We could look at the political field where you could try to, let's say you try to run for a political field and you're objected to, you got to go to court. Now these people in low income areas, black and browns, we have an experience with court that say, I'm not going. Landlords. Every avenue of this country has to face the courts. So when we talk about reparations and we talk about giving back from what was taken away, we look at that. We look at the court system, the judicial system, as a prime example. We need leverage in this country. We cannot get leverage through the political field. We're being manipulated. We're being manipulated in various different grounds on the criminal field, civil, wherever way you want to put it, we're being manipulated. And until we have the resources to actually equal the playing field, you can look at education or whatever. You go out to a white neighborhood, you see the schools, they have beautiful swimming pools. Football stadiums are like arenas. You come back to Philadelphia, go out to West Philly High. That's one of the best ones in the city. Go out to Northeast. We are struggling. We are bleeding. And until we get the reparations that actually build in our communities, build up our communities, then freedom has not been wholly provided. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Sydney Brown, the 2020 Youth Poet Laureate of Philadelphia. I will be reciting a poem I wrote entitled Repair. Can everyone hear me? Good? Okay, cool. Oh, is that good? Okay. Repair. Emancipation Proclamation 1863. 40 acres and a mule you promised me. My palms carry the legacy of ancestors before me. Pathways braided into hair. We suffer. Do you dare to care? Witness brokenness that needs repair. Black people getting pushed out of their homes, brownstones, gentrified neighborhoods, black skin being misunderstood. If you could change the world, would you? If all it took was a book, your voice, a film, the choice is yours to pick up the pen and write how history should happen. We can nurture the sick if we come together. We can prevent the flood if we watch the weather. We can break the chains if we train our brains to see the injustices affecting everybody. Don't just watch trees grow. Get your hands dirty and plant seeds. So I know that my ancestors didn't die for nothing. 1865, lawfully free, shot and hung unlawfully, running towards freedom some couldn't see. Giving back land isn't just about me, it's the possibility of new generations working towards equity, real education, finding salvation and connecting through spirituality. We don't need neutrality on issues of change. Do not remain constant unless you're constantly helping us rearrange our future. These reparations can heal our past because the aftermath still has lasting impacts. They'd rather have me behind bars, dead, beaten with scars while they hold the key. The world would be so much better if we celebrated unity. I know I am worthy of freedom in a world that doesn't want me to be free. And I ask much of you because the world asks much of me. So we celebrate freedom, shackles broken, stories spoken aloud but not found in the textbooks. We put our fists high in solidarity where we are meant to be. We celebrate Juneteenth. Thank you.
Coming up next, we're going to have the Jewish Call to Confession and Jewish Demand for Reparations by Rabbi Mira Wasserman, the director of the Center for Jewish Ethics, followed by Jared Jackson, the founder and executive director for Jews in All Hues. Then we're going to have testimony by Gabrielle James, a member of the Green Street Friends Meeting in Philadelphia, and David Ragland, the co-executive director of the Truth Telling Project. And we'll end that section with the Anna Crucis Feminist Choir. Please receive them in that order.
Where's Sydney? Wow, wow, wow. I'm Rabbi Mira Wasserman, the director of the Center for Jewish Ethics on the faculty at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. I'm so honored and grateful to be here, so moved by the words and stories and songs we've heard so far. A little bit from the Jews. In the United States, most Jews trace their ancestries back to Europe. Families like mine arrived a century ago in great waves of immigration. For my great-grandparents, America was a dream fulfilled, a refuge from the persecution, poverty, and prejudices of Europe. My family, like many immigrant families, was intent on making it in America, on becoming American, and for some of my relatives that meant embracing capitalism, for others, Christmas trees. It meant becoming white and turning away from how the Jewish American dream was intertwined with the nightmare of systemic racism. My family's privilege was built on top of the privation and persecution of Black people, the very people who had built this American refuge. Today, many white Jews are waking up from the American dream, confronting the realities of our privilege and how the injustices of slavery and segregation persist. We find wisdom about the justice of reparations in Jewish teachings and in Jewish experience. For religious Jews, the commandments of the Torah are a call to live lives in pursuit of love and of justice. Every morning and every night, we recite the words of the Shema, committing ourselves to following God's instruction with verses drawn from Deuteronomy 6. Shema, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. B'chol lebavcha, with all your heart. B'chol nafshecha, with your whole self. B'chol me'odcha, with all your might. In studying these words, some ancient Jews wondered, what did it mean? What does it mean to love with your might? To love with your heart, with your soul? This we can understand. But what does it mean to live with one's might? The early rabbis explained, one's might is one's money. Human beings being what we are, the rabbis understood that thoughts and prayers come too easy. Words are cheap. The real measure of a love that is real, a love that is whole, is the readiness to give of one's possessions, to make a sacrifice. This is what a faithful life demands according to Jewish teaching. Hear, O Israel, put your money where your mouth is. Put your money, put your time, put all you've got into your love of God and into what God demands. Love and justice. Love God with your whole heart, with your whole soul, with your possessions. Commit your money, because this is how words become true and love becomes real. That's a teaching from the Torah, from religious teachings, but we learn about reparations from more recent Jewish experience too. When Jewish survivors of the Holocaust accepted reparations from Germany, they knew that no amount of money could repay or repair the destruction of a single life, let alone the murder of millions. So too with the genocides wrought by slavery in this country. God told Cain, "Your brother's blood cries out to me from the grounds." American land, too, is steeped in the blood of siblings, of ancestors. Black lives stolen in 1619, in 1865, in 2022. Reparations will not restore them to life. But reparations are the best way we have of demonstrating that we are listening. God calls on us to hear these cries, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. Our Black siblings will know we are listening. Our Black siblings will know our resolve is real when we put our time and our money into the sacred pursuit of reparations.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was born in Philadelphia. My father was born in Philadelphia. My father, however, was a product of rape. My grandmother at 13 years old was raped when they had just moved here from North Carolina. That is one type of harm that my family has experienced. That's one type of harm that I feel in my body and my sisters feel in their bodies every single day. Another harm is on my mother's side, where my family experienced pogroms in Eastern Europe. They escaped the Russian Empire so that my father, who was my grandfather, who was 6 months old at the time, could actually be an American citizen. He was actually not on the manifest. He was snuck into the country for some odd reason. But that is another type of harm. The fear that went through their veins, the fear that triggered other trauma that led my grandfather to be abused by his family, led my father to be abused by his family because they didn't know how to process it. There was no support system. There was no one to hear their calls. There were no words to use for those calls, just abuse. And today, we have this country still in cycles of abuse. We have this country here today that is telling us that we are not worthy. And this country that was founded, as we've all heard, on genocide, that trauma, that legacy that's telling us that we are not worthy of what we are owed is dead wrong. Now, in our Jewish tradition, there are many, many verses, as the rabbi could probably point out, as she did point out. Thank you. But one thing that really strikes me, and it's actually on a little card out here on the cork board here, it says, "Love thy neighbor." Has everyone heard that before? Raise your hand if you've heard that. Yes? And the saying goes, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," right? But what if you don't have the support system to love yourself? What if nobody told you that you were worthy of loving yourself? This is also what we have to deal with. The mental health crisis that we have in this country, not just because of the pandemic, but going back hundreds of years. We have to do more than just monetary reparations. We have to do more than taking care of financial health, because remember, capitalism is all about finances. It is not about people. We have to do more for our neighbors, because you all, being my neighbors, are my family. You are the people that I want to entrust with not only myself, but with my son, who is 6 years old, who I see shudder every time a siren goes by. I know that look. I know that face. It's my look. It's my face. We need more than monetary reparations. We need health care. We need mental health care. We need better schools. We need to teach people and build pipelines so that people can be the authentic, empathetic teachers and leaders that they can be, free as much as possible. So my mandate, as someone who is Black and Jewish and a Philadelphian, is to love you, not just because you are who you are, but because I've learned to love myself. And I want you to feel that love. Thank you.
We're going to have a small change in the program. Please welcome the Anna Crucis Feminist Choir. One more round of applause for the Anna Cruces Seminars Choir. The next two voices you will hear is Gabrielle James, a member of the Green Street Friends meeting in Philadelphia, followed by David Ragland, co-executive director of the Truth Telling Project.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thanks. So my name is Gabrielle James. I'm a member of Green Street Friends Meeting, which is in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. And I want to tell you some background, a little story about Green Street. So Green Street is like many meetings, Quaker meetings in this area. We have maybe about 80 members and about 40 or 50 who show up on a regular basis. And our meeting house, like many meeting houses in the area, it was falling apart, like I can't lie. It was leaking, it was flooding, the furnace kept breaking, it was really a mess, and it was, many times we'd actually have to have a fire to heat it in the wintertime because there just was no heat. So we decided to have a contractor come out and really look at all the things that were wrong in the meeting and see how much it would cost to fix. And when the contractor wrote everything up, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And most people in the meeting were like, oh, so is it like, are we going to start like a bake sale? Like, how are we going to do this? And the people, from trustees and budget said, oh, or we could just pay it. And many of us were like, just pay it, like we have the money to pay that? And they were like, yeah, we could just pay it. So many members of the meeting then became actually kind of uncomfortable. Like, well, if we have money, what are we doing? What are we doing with our money? And so we embarked on a journey. We started about a 6-month kind of workshop on the weekends, and we called it it was called the spirituality of money, where we examine what does money mean? What is it used for? How is it used? How does it work in faith communities? Like we spent months looking at, thinking about, and talking about money. And just what does money mean? And at the end of that time, our member, Lucy, decided to make a reparations committee. She was like, okay, so now that we are kind of all on the same page and we understand a little bit more about the meeting's finances, money, and what we are and aren't doing in the community, let's actually do work. Let's get together and do work. So we started this reparations working group. It was like 6 people. It was small. And we got together and we started meeting and we started thinking about what are we going to do. We should take some of the meetings money that has been there. Green Street meeting is from the 1840s. So a lot of the money is old. It's been there for a long time. Members of the meeting gave money, right? They passed away, they gave money. There's this endowment. So the working group started coming up with ideas of things that we could do in our community. We thought very much we should focus our attention in Germantown. So of course, back in the day, Germantown was German. It was a white area, right? But now Germantown is predominantly black neighborhood. And Green Street meeting has a school. And it wasn't until the 60s that Green Street allowed not white kids into the school. So we know there's harm there, right? We know that we have this space, we have this land, we have this school, and that we had not. I've been a member of Green Street for about 15 years now. I've been going there. So we started coming up with ideas, and we were not getting help from the meeting. We were not getting support. The meeting was not together with us and supporting what we were doing. So a couple of members of the reparations group said, okay, we're going to do something different. We're going to look at the budget and we're going to talk about how much money we spend on other things and how much money should we and can we spend on reparations. Can we spend on reparative justice and in our community, helping the people in our community that most likely we have harmed in the last 150 years. So a couple of members of reparations came together and they came up with the idea of like really a formula. This is what the budget looks like. We're going to, and they came up with an amount of money. And we brought it to the meeting for business, Quaker thing, and it was approved. The meeting was like, okay, we can see from the budget that we can take this amount of money and we can use it for reparations. We can use it for reparative justice. And the other thing that was in that was that we were going to say that the Black members of the meeting are in control of what gets done, right? The Black members of the meeting are going to meet and we're going to talk and we're going to determine what gets done, because you know what happens a lot is that when white people give money, then they want, where did it go? What did you do with it? How was it used? All these kind of things that many times, if you know like I know, when they give money to other white people, they don't ask those questions, right? So we set it up and how we wrote it up and what we presented to the meeting that Black members will determine what's going to happen, and we will share with you what we're doing. Not report, not, you know, there's not going to be any kind of, so that is the history. That is the beginning of reparations at Green Street, of the reparative justice work, right? Thank you. So about 12 Black members of the meeting met, just us, and we said, what do we want to do in Germantown? We have this money that the meeting has now put aside and guaranteed to put aside for the next 10 years. What are we going to do? And we have members who are educators and they want to do things around education. And we have members who are therapists and counselors and want to do things around mental health. Me personally, I work in housing. I've been working in housing now for more than 10 years. And I said, hey, let's work around tangled titles, probate, and wills. Let's figure out a way to stabilize the Black wealth that is in Germantown already, because the city is gentrifying. All of the city is gentrifying, right? All of the city people, moms and grandmoms and grandparents and uncles, are losing their houses because someone passed away and there was no will. There was no planning for the future. You have these tangled titles all over the city, right? So we said, okay, this year we're going to work on housing. We're going to work on tangled titles and probate and wills. So we, some of the members, amazing members on this reparations group, reached out to Community Legal Services and Philly VIP and different lawyers, and we got them to come to the meeting. And we put flyers up all over Germantown, and we went to the churches and we tried to talk to everyone and said, hey, we have this free thing that you can come and do. Started in January, Martin Luther King weekend, and we ended on Saturday, Juneteenth weekend. Right now, we have helped and are in the process of helping around at least 80 families in Germantown. Get wills. Lawyers are working if someone has passed away, because you know COVID hit the Black community hard. There has been deaths, people have passed away, they weren't prepared for it. We have lawyers right now working to get people's houses in their names, to help them with their taxes. Since we had this assessment, many of y'all know, now taxes are going crazy, so we are working in on all of these issues. And when the fees come, the filing charges, anything comes, the meeting pays it. No money has to come out of a person's pocket to fix the problem that they had with their will or with their tingle title or even with their taxes. We are helping. Now, I'm not saying we're paying all of these back things, but we're having the lawyers work on them, and then we are putting money on or towards, and we're paying the filing. And our goal is that people in Germantown, we will help them stabilize the Black wealth in their family, and we will help keep Germantown. It won't turn into University City, hopefully. Like, nobody wants that. Like, you know what I mean? So on Saturday, we had our last in-person legal clinic so far, because we have 10 years and we don't know what we're going to do next. The Black members will come together and we will decide if we're going to keep doing the same thing or if we're going to switch to something else. We're not sure. But I want to state that on Saturday, we invited people that we had worked with and helped already to come and celebrate us. We had a barbecue, free food, barbecue chicken, coleslaw, watermelon, water ice, everything. It was lovely. And people came and they told us, thank you. And not only were they thankful, we were thankful. There was so much joy in the meeting members. There was so much happiness. My son came and he said to me, "You look so happy." And I said, "I am. Because I'm doing this work, this spiritual work in my community with my neighbors, and I know that I'm making a difference." You know, so when I think about reparations, when I speak about spiritual work, everything that you do is not just for someone else. You know what I mean? That, yes, that should be something that guides you. But you also should be doing things, as Lucy said, as other people have said, for yourself, for your ancestors, and for your children, your progeny, what's coming next. We have to change our past and work now in the present for our futures. And that is the thing that Green Sheet has done and we will continue to do in our community going forward. So I definitely invite all of you to do this in your own communities, in your own faith communities, to move forward and make change and make things better. Thank you.
Let's give her one more round of applause, because it's so good to be here. Thank you all for having me. And similar to Soraya, I feel so much spirit in this place, and I was actually going to say something different, but I forgot just that quick. But so I'm Dave Ragland. I'm one of the co-directors of the Truth Telling Project, and I'm going to just talk to you about our work, particularly, and just like this notion of reparations as a spiritual practice, and also faith-based organizing. And I think for me, like, this work goes way back. My dad picked cotton until he was 14 in Brownsville, Tennessee. And I also, as I began, I want to honor my ancestors as well. Fannie Lou Hamer, Queen Mother Moore, Queen Mother Dorothy Benton Lewis, because those are the roots of our reparations movement. And, you know, I was telling you that my dad picked cotton until he was 14 when he came to St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm from St. Louis. And he, you know, a lot of people from around the country came up north. Some people call it the Great Negro Migration. It was an escape from racial terrorism to be met in northern cities with racial terrorism. So in St. Louis, in Ferguson, which is right next to St. Louis, which, you know, they try to make it like it's not St. Louis, Mike Brown was killed August 9th, I'm sorry, I'm tired and nervous, 2014. And at the time I was living in Pennsylvania. I was teaching at Bucknell University, and the day before Mike Brown was killed, I was just finished teaching the summer session, and I was on the phone with my mom, and I was like, should I come home? Like, I don't have anything to do. You know, your mom like, come home, boy. So I bought a ticket right then, and I was in St. Louis. And while I was there initially as an academic, and I didn't know what to do necessarily, because I had studied nonviolence. My PhD was in peace and conflict studies, so I knew the movement. I've been a non-violent protester. I had studied the 60s movement interpreted through academia, and I had been involved in a lot of anti-war protests, particularly after 9/11, when our government took us to war that we're still in and still paying for, but we can't pay reparations. Y'all don't want me to preach up in here? Y'all said it was a revival. I gotta use my Holy Ghost voice at some point. But I was in St. Louis, and Kamani Gray was killed right after, not Kamani Gray, but Kajimi Pa was killed right after Mike Brown, a couple days after Mike Brown, across the street from my parents' house. And while I was standing outside, I got a call from a friend who was like, what are you doing? And again, I was like, well, I might write a paper. But at that point, I stayed longer than I should have because I was worried about my parents' house and all of the stuff that was happening. I was worried about them. And when my friend said that over the phone, I really was like, yeah, you know, like, I should do something. And so I had called up a couple of people who I know, and we began talking about what was possible. And we began what turned into the Truth Telling Project, was essentially a locally based truth process. I don't know if you all are familiar with South Africa, Greensboro, North Carolina, Peru, Chile. So many places have truth processes as a way to address historical trauma or long-standing violence, or just these histories, right? These things that need to be uncovered. And you know, some of the people who we started this process with were community members, and we created a process based on what our community wanted. And we were initially saying truth and reconciliation. It was like, you know, I don't know about reconciliation, but we can do some truth telling right now. And so for me, that was really formative in my education, understanding where communities are at when it comes to the notion of reconciliation. And so we began doing these hearings after a whole lot of stuff, after learning from the folks in Greensboro, North Carolina, who put on the first Truth and Reconciliation process in the country. Reverend Joyce Nelson out of Greensboro. So many people from all around St. Louis had actually been experiencing police violence, so we were hearing from their families, and we were also hearing from families around the country who had experienced police brutality. And then in 2017, toward the end of our hearings, or actually it was toward the end of 2016, and I was standing in a church, St. Mark's, and the drummers for the opening ceremony had come to me, and we were talking about that this was about to be, next year was going to be the 100-year anniversary of the East St. Louis Massacre. And I don't know if folks know about this, but in 1917, there were white people who were angry that black folk were doing well. Black folks who had been recruited by their bosses to come work in the factories during World War I. And as you know how this turns out, there was over a month of violence against black folk in East St. Louis. And the man who was telling me his story also told me that his grandparents had made it across the Mississippi River in a rickety boat because they tried to come across the Edmund Pettus footbridge. Was this the Edmund Pettus footbridge? So, and the Missouri Patrol police turned them away. And I was looking in the audience because at the time people were still telling their stories about their experience with police violence, and white folks was in the audience crying. And I got upset. And I began to think about the connections between truth and reparations. I got upset because I knew that they could go home to a different material condition and a different reality than we can, than the folks in that community, the folks who were telling their stories. And that was, for me, the beginning of our work around reparations. But we thought that reparations was a spiritual practice, that it had to be the midpoint between truth and reparations. Nowhere should people be telling their stories and reparations is not involved. But we wanted to really understand reparations, and so we worked with a number of groups, and particularly faith-based groups. We worked with so many folks like Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams and Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb, and we were just really thinking about what was the spiritual foundations of reparations. And for me, what reparations is addressing is the stuff of truth. It's the story. It is our human dignity. It is that which is most sacred about us, which is our lives, the things that we go through. And I didn't always realize that storytelling was a spiritual practice, to bear all of the things that you went through. And then folks look at you and nothing happens. And so we started looking at truth also from that broader UN framework, because reparations has always been a part of the construct of truth and reparations. And technically, it's called transitional justice. And so reparations is a part of it. And so when you look at the UN framework, it begins with compensation. Cut the damn check. It continues with healing. And it's talking about not just, mental health but this trauma that connects with our body. One restorative justice scholar, Jody Geddes, describes how we experience this trauma and our body keeps the score. But not just our body, our spirituality. Because when we think about reparations, why are we doing it? We're doing it because in 1492 and years after that, the Pope issued the papal bull, which said, enslave them, take their lands, and subjugate them in perpetuity. So part of the grounding is the history of religion, right, that was explicit about enslaving people. So stealing religions. When black folks was enslaved in this country, they stole the drum. And I think, so the other parts of reparations named in the United Nations framework include satisfaction, which is about education and truth-telling and changing memorial statues. And so some of the work we're doing at Truth Telling Project is in Savannah around changing the names of Confederate memorials and monuments. Almost, I mean, when you think about it, even up north, many of these streets and universities are named by slaveholders or named after slaveholders. Take down William Penn. And then restitution, give it back. Don't give back some of it, give back all of it. If you steal my cow, don't give me some butter every few months. I want the damn cow back. And I'm going to close out by talking about the final principle of reparations, which is guarantees of non-repeat. And I'm talking about a United Nations framework. And I usually curse when I talk about this framework, particularly guarantees of non-repeat, but I won't. I'm going to hold myself. The guarantees of non-repeat means that you can't do the stuff that you did to get us here in the first damn place. How do we not do the stuff that we did to get us here in the first damn place? Capital One has a very good commercial that asks, what's in your wallet? What do you spend your money on? What are you invested in? What is in your retirement account? Are you investing in TIA Cruff, who is taking land in the same amount of the acres of land lost by black people and using it for agribusiness? Are you invested in Sabra hummus? One of the things we have to understand is that the way that capitalism has been able, and it's not just capitalism, it is the way that we spend money. We spend money every day on evil without knowing it. It's not just, is the person a bad person who owns this company? Is it like the Koch brothers who own Brownie paper towels, who are partially responsible for kids in Flint, Michigan drinking water with lead in it? It is about supply chains. Is there slavery in your supply chain? So when we talk about reparations as a spiritual practice, it is also connected to climate change. As we think about who's going to be impacted from climate disaster, communities on the margins, black and brown communities all over the country. And then who's going to benefit from that? So when we are buying properties and when we're buying things and investments that are essentially extracting from the planet, we continue to extract from black folks. When you buy anything, right? Some coffee, for instance, or Mayfair mattresses, right? That Mayfair has been known to supply mattresses for prisons. So the spiritual practice of reparations is not just about like looking to see, am I invested in injustice? But it's about this broader consciousness shift to look at what are we doing every day with our energy. Are we breathing the life that this country says we have, which this country says the only life you have is your money. Where do you spend your money? The only place where your value is your money. So it's the place where you're valued the most in this society. Is it spent breathing life into death or life? Do you have companies, weapons manufacturers, oil and gas production? And so I just want to end here and just really name that reparations is about becoming less of a moral monster, unraveling ourselves from complicity in the system. And I'll be happy to talk to you more about it. Thank you all.
Next up, we're going to have our Christian call to confession and Christian demand for reparations. That will be Reverend Dr. Susan Richardson, the Associate Rector at Christ Church, and Bishop Dwayne Royster, the Executive Director of Power Interfaith. That will be followed by 2 selections from Scott Stevens and the Christ Glory. Please receive them in that order.
Thanks, y'all. I'm Susan. Really grateful to be here. So grateful to be part of the Mayoral Commission. Thank y'all for just having a moment of your time. I was asked to do a call to confession, Christian call to confession. But I'm afraid I need to make mine mainly a white Christian call to confession, and specifically confession of the way that racism and white nationalism has so shaped the white church of this country and its history. Beyond that, I can only hope, as with any confession, that the words and the transformation they call us to might also be helpful for Christians of color or anyone who is just curious about Jesus. My siblings in Christ, and especially my white siblings, let us call to mind the sin of the racism that has riddled church history, whether against people of color, First Nations, Jews, or others. We have supported injustice to secure our own well-being. We have allowed oppression of other humans to silently glide forward in the name of keeping order, which became the order of the empire at the expense of humanity. We must ever press back against the white supremacist nationalism embedded in so much of Christianity in this country, and not just speak against it, but to speak for a different kind of Christianity in our communities and in ourselves. And we can only speak to that if we are truly seeking it. As well as we think we know Scripture and Jesus, we have to call ourselves to confess that we have left understanding Him at superficial levels and in mild, domesticated ways that served a white church, rather than challenging it. Let us seek to understand Jesus of Nazareth in ever deeper ways, and allow that understanding to shine new light on us. Let us see privileges that we have taken for granted as rights that should be shared. Let us be genuinely curious and open to the stories of those who have not had those human rights, and let it help us free up our full humanity. As the Reverend Stephanie Spellers has written, an Episcopal priest of color who's at the highest echelon in my own tradition, the problem of simply dismissing privilege is that most of what we call privileges are basic human rights. It's a privilege to not be viewed as a threat by your own government and its agents, but should it be? And here I'll add the human right of access to quality health care and education over the course of a lifetime and across generations. The human right of access to safe, affordable housing if your background didn't serve it up easily. The human right of going shopping at the neighborhood grocery store on a Saturday afternoon to get food for Sunday dinner. The human right of going to a Bible study in your local church without having your life threatened. Let those of us benefiting from the privilege of whiteness look, as Stephanie says, to the proper stewardship of privilege so that it simply becomes human rights. Let us continue to search for places in our daily lives to cross boundaries and be in solidarity with those who are held back, so that our solidarity helps the resources we have become tools for others too. And let us use those resources toward the reparations that may never be enough, but are still the necessary place to begin. Let us all, as Christians, look at Jesus of Nazareth and see not what the white church has made into a white king riding a wave of individualistic victory, but let us commit to studying the scriptures more deeply in an informed and historically educated way, aware of how they have been misused. Scripture can be our most life-giving tool, or abused wrongly can be death-dealing, as it has been in so much of our country's history, especially in relation to people of color, LGBTQ+ community, and certainly in service to anti-Semitism. Let us be ever aware of Jesus, our Lord, as a Jewish man who died hanging from 2 sticks of wood in what was a common form of torture and abuse for many Jewish people at the time under the occupation of the Roman Empire. Let us see Jesus as someone who could look at the particularity of a human standing in front of him, their particular eyes and body and beauty and brokenness, their pain, including their prejudice, and love them without empowering their worst. Let us look to Jesus and see the dark-skinned man who in all probability was slight in build with hair that was probably not straight, and who was ultimately killed for being a threat to the Roman Empire and its way of maintaining order. Let us see the dark-skinned man who died the way that those who were crucified die. It's not from loss of blood. That would take a matter of minutes. When you're crucified that way, you die from asphyxiation over a long period of time because you can no longer pull your body up to breathe. In other words, let us see our Savior as a dark-skinned Jewish man who died at the hands of the empire for being an inconvenience, in effect saying, I can't breathe. Let us always see that Jesus the Christ had the specificity of this dark-skinned man and was also the co-creator of all of creation, beyond gender or color. And remember his wisdom teaching that where our treasure is, our heart will be. People often flip it, they get it wrong, and they say, where your heart is, your treasure will go. That's too easy. Regarding reparations, where our treasure goes, then our hearts will follow. And our delusion that we can succeed individually by separating ourselves from others and from nature, animals, water, plants, and air, is perhaps the sin of the highest order and is the sin that enables the sin of racism. Let us understand that as we look to the Messiah, let's look at this co-creator the way that the great mystics do. And finally, let us look to God, who is wiser and more loving than the best of us, and offer our fight toward God's work of the eschaton, the great final gathering up of all people and all creations when no more tears will be shed, offering ourselves and our service toward the end that is more than we can imagine. And I'll close with a blessing based on one from the great Franciscan tradition in the way of St. Francis, the saint most beloved and least imitated. And I do take liberty with just tweaking it for this occasion. And when I say us here, I mean all of us, but especially those of us who are white who have benefited from whiteness. May God bless us with a restless discomfort about easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may seek the truth boldly and love deep within our hearts. May God bless us with holy anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people and of all creation, so that we may tirelessly work for justice, freedom, and peace among all. May God bless us with the gift of tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, or the loss of all that they cherish, including the losses that cannot be restored from centuries of racism. We ask these things so that we may reach out our hands to comfort others and transform their pain into joy and restriction into opportunity. And finally, may God bless us with enough holy foolishness to believe that we really can make a difference in this world, and so that we are able, with God's grace, to do what others claim cannot be done. Amen.
This one's not on. Is it button? Oh, got it. Testing. My name is Dwayne Royster. I'm the Executive Director of Power Interfaith here in the state of Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania's largest faith-based organizing movement. The late Howard Thurman, in his book, Jesus and the Disinherited, asked this question: what does your faith say to people with their backs up against the wall? I would dare say that for many of the faith traditions, especially those that have claimed whiteness, that what you tell people is go to hell. And that here in the city of Philadelphia, if you have melanin in your skin, that basically on a daily basis you wake up in the morning feeling like you are going to hell. You're going to hell because you don't know if you can get from where you are to your destination without being worried about being hassled by the police department. You're going to hell because you're worried about making sure you can pay a mortgage on a property that should have been in your families a long time ago, but they keep making you refinance over and over again and increasing the interest rates. You're going to hell because you're sending your children to school, in a school that is not often equipped to give them the best education possible. And at the root of this fact that you're going to hell are white Christian nationalists and Christian nationalists of the evangelical, the fundamental, and the mainline churches that have basically said you don't matter. The very fact that there are multiple Methodist Episcopal denominations existed because of what happened at St. George's Church some 200 years ago, and the rift still has not been healed. So before folks say, well, I don't go to one of those evangelical churches, no, y'all mainline folk, you still have problems too. You still have not worked out your stuff. You still have not go to church on Sunday after Sunday, and if you see 5 black folk in your congregation, you feel like we have a multicultural church. The reality is that when we're dealing with racism and oppression and white supremacy and white Christian nationalism, it has a 400-year head start in this country that has permeated every institution, every organization, every faith tradition over and over again. And many of us who try to get closer in proximity to whiteness are satisfied when we are able to be blessed because we can act like white folk. Racism and oppression manifests itself in multiple levels, and we have to have some honest conversations. It's not just personal. You can't just say, I've got a black friend, and somehow or another that doesn't make me racist. Because there's systemic racism, there's structural racism, there's economic racism, and there's cultural racism. And when we want to have a conversation about reparations, it's not enough to talk about the interpersonal. And notwithstanding what has been said in this room today, it's not just enough to talk about money. Because you can give us money today, change the laws tomorrow, and extract that which you have already given us and send us right back to hell. If we're not prepared to have a deep conversation about changing the culture in our society, tearing down the institutions that have supported oppression over and over again, whether it is government structures, whether it's educational institutions, whether it is even our faith traditions, if we're not prepared to decolonize all of them, then to talk about reparations is an absolute waste of time. I believe without a shadow of a doubt that in this particular moment as communities of faith, we have to be prepared to be agents of change and reconciliation. But I'm not talking about a kumbaya moment. I'm talking about a recognition that some of these steepled churches that exist in this city have been built off the blacks of black folk. Many of you might have heard the story recently about Georgetown University. Some years ago, they ran into a place of bankruptcy, and they needed to get themselves out of trouble, so they sold their slaves. And now, with a $2 billion endowment, billions of dollars worth of property in Washington, D.C., they decided they were going to give some reparations. Amen, somebody. And so they said that we're going to make sure that anybody that's a descendant of one of those slaves can get a free education at Georgetown University. You only have to be able to prove that you're a descendant of the slaves. And the second thing they said was, we're going to take $100 million and create a fund and be able to go and with that $100 million, we're going to provide some additional reparations to those families. So 170 years later, they're going to provide reparations of $100 million to hundreds of people. But those slaves generated $2 billion of an endowment, billions of dollars in property in Washington, D.C. It's not enough, y'all. It's not enough. Now, what they really ought to do is hire a president and a vice president and chief academic officer who are African American, and then reconstruct their educational institution and make sure that all the folk that live in Washington, D.C. and the DMV area can go to school there for free. That's the way that you're going to change it. In the Toni Morrison novel, Beloved, there is a sermon that's given by Baby Suggs. And in this novel, she says, up yonder, they don't love this flesh. She goes further in the course of this sermon and begins to talk about not only don't they love your flesh, they don't love your heart, they don't love your liver, they don't love your hands, they don't love your feet, they don't love you. Real reparations means you have to learn to love me. No, y'all missed that one. See, I'm not talking about we can just say in our heart that I love you and that it's okay, because most of that we know is fake. What I'm talking about is that deep, permeating love that transcends the implicit bias that Harvard University tells us is in the minds of each and every one of us, that transcends that implicit bias that says, when I see you, I love you. I don't need to cross the street because 3 young teenage black men are walking up the way. I'm going to stay right here and greet them as they come down the street because I love them. I don't need to run from them. I need to embrace them and welcome them and say hey to them. How y'all doing today? I need to be able to say I love that flesh, not just because that our grandmothers were the wet nurses that fed white babies, or the fact that there were black hands that wiped white behinds while they were in nursing homes, but that you can love my flesh because I am who I am. I am created in the image and likeness of God, and I am worthy to receive respect, honor, and dignity. We have the audacity to say, in places where, like we're fighting with power, trying to get education funding reallocated. Beloved, time out for talking about equality. Equality is not enough. We need equity, because generations upon generations upon generations have been denied their due in this nation. How many times when we go to the state capitol do we hear over and over again, well, if we reallocate the money, what happens to the districts that already are getting what they have? You'll be taking from them. And what I'm being told is that rich white kids are more important than poor black and brown kids. I need some of y'all to go get your cousins in them and stop avoiding Thanksgiving dinner. Y'all need to go home and go have a conversation with them. Let me just be clear. I don't want anybody to have trauma. I don't want anybody to have trauma. But some of y'all are avoiding your people, and they're continuing to inflict the trauma upon my people. If you're not prepared to go deal with your folk, don't come telling me your sob story. Go handle your people. It is this call in this moment. So I come at this from a theopolitical framework, so forgive me if I don't sound very holy. Maybe I'm not holy, and maybe part of the problem that we have is that holiness has been defined by white supremacy for far too long. Forgive me for a moment, but I know that we are inside a religious institution, but some of y'all need to get off your asses and go out there and change the damn world. Y'all need to get up and start doing some work and not being satisfied with what we have going on. It's enough. I know we need housing programs. I know we need food programs, but somebody's got to go stand up to the powers and the principalities, the rulers of darkness in high places that sit in City Hall, that sit in Washington, D.C., that sit in Harrisburg, and get up and do something about the circumstances and situations that we find ourselves in. And if the system won't change, then tear it down. When George Floyd was killed, murdered, assassinated, the protests rose up here in the city of Philadelphia. Some white high steeple churches opened up their doors so protesters had a place to go. We thank God for all of our siblings that did that. But now we need you to, like Green Street, investigate your big buildings that are worth millions of dollars. And ask yourself, could that be better used to help those that are struggling here in the city of Philadelphia? We need to ask in this particular moment, one of the things that we were able to get past, and I know that two of the commissioners are here tonight, Commissioner Elder Melanie DeBose and Commissioner Hassan Bennett are members of the Civilian Police Oversight Commission that passed here in the city of Philadelphia by ballot measure. But we need to ask the question, does the city council and the mayor still believe in the Police Oversight Commission so black folk have a place to go when the police act crazy, or are they going to try to underfund it for the sake of cutting out its needs and not giving it the power that it needs? Y'all got real quiet on me on that. See, I don't want to talk about reparations up here and have great theoretical and intellectual conversation when people are dying here on the streets of Philadelphia. Let's make sure that the mayor puts the money where it needs to be. Let's make sure that there's full fair funding in the state of Pennsylvania. We got a few weeks left before the budget is finished. Can we make sure that we finally get funding that needs to come here to Philadelphia and school districts of color all across the state? Can we make sure that that happens? Can we have the audacity to believe that we can hold Wells Fargo accountable for the redlining that took place in Philadelphia for over 100 centuries that has created some of the greatest levels of housing disparity and poverty? Can we make the city and Wells Fargo make such that all the abandoned houses that exist in the city of Philadelphia are fixed up at the expense of Wells Fargo, and that African Americans are put in those homes free of charge so that they can live their lives with dignity and respect? Now, I know some of y'all might not have wanted me to get that specific, but I can't come in and just do a theoretical conversation. Because if I was to be real honest, white supremacy likes conversation. Let's have a committee to have a committee to have a committee. And then maybe we'll figure out what we're going to do. And by the time we finally finish what's going to happen, we get to a place that we're already moved on to another issue, and so we never deal with it in the first place. So let's have real conversation about how we're going to change this damn city and how reparations is a vehicle to change it for black folk. Today is about black folk. Let me say that again, it's about black folk. It's about black folk. African descendants of slaves, children of God. Finally, let me say in our Christian tradition that we believe that we have been created in the image and likeness of God. The Imago Dei. Kabbalah says that in each of us is a divine spark. When you don't love me because of my flesh, when you don't love my heart, my feet, my hands, when you don't love my neck because you'd rather see it in the noose than be set free to swivel and tell you the truth, then you're not just hating on me, you're hating on the God that created me. Take that back to your church and tell them the truth. Amen.
We're going to have a quick change in the program. We're going to now hear from State Representative Chris Rabb live through Zoom. Then we're going to have two musical selections from Scott Stevens and Christ Glory.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? My name is State Representative Chris Rabb, AKA Rep Rabb. I'm honored to be with you today, albeit remotely. I am in Harrisburg. State Representative Chris Rabb, AKA Rep Rabb. I'm honored to be with you today, albeit I appreciate being here. I see that there's a lag with the audio, so I'll try not to listen to myself. It's tough following Bishop Royster, but honored to do so in this moment. I'm going to be speaking as a state lawmaker as it relates to reparations. And I feel particularly moved by the commentary of Bishop Royster when he said, this is about Black folk. Can someone nod if you can still hear me? All right. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep my remarks short. We need reparations in Pennsylvania, and as a state lawmaker, I'm really focusing on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, its government, its court system, and the various public and private institutions, including religious orders, universities, hospitals, captains of industry, industries that have influenced our complicity in the subjugation of Black people for generations, for centuries, since Pennsylvania became a colony itself. And while it's true Pennsylvania enacted gradual abolition in 1780, what it really did was create two different forms of unfreedom thereafter for another 85 years. Two classes of unfree Black Pennsylvanians, those who were enslaved for life and those who were enslaved for a discrete term of years. A lot of people don't know that. They just said Pennsylvania was the first to have abolition, and it is not true. But more importantly, Pennsylvania invested in white supremacist laws and practices from the 1600s to the present. When I took office in January of 2017, no one ever gave me a compendium of laws and court cases that laid out all the white supremacist policies born of these institutions. I had to stumble across them myself. And ultimately that inspired me to work on legislation for reparations for Black Pennsylvanians for systemic racism and slavery. Not one or the other, but both. And I want to preempt any questions about the cost of this endeavor. Because one of the questions I get most commonly is, well, how much would the checks be made out for? And how much would it take to provide reparations across the state? Well, if the transatlantic slave trade was a precursor to capitalism, the same capitalism we are suffering under today, know that any real solutions to such systemic problems demand systemic solutions. So individuating the response to white supremacy is an approach poisoned by an inherently capitalistic framework. We have to talk about how we address fundamental systems. Secondly, how much would it take to eradicate racial disparities and shift our society toward mass liberation is indeed incalculable, but whose success is nevertheless very easy to measure. In other words, we can stop investing in race-specific efforts when the impetus to do so has vanished. So it will take as long as it takes, and it will cost as much as it costs. And the best way to accept this approach is to realize that that's what we already do when it comes to things in mainstream society, the things that we prioritize, such as militarism and the carceral state. Somehow, when it comes to those two things, it doesn't matter how much it costs. Am I right? The only difference here is that this could not succeed as a profit-driven experiment. And more importantly, this would be an investment in communal healing, in Black liberation and reconciliation, and not destruction. While I first announced work on this bill on the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first enslaved Africans in the colonies, I've yet to formally introduce this bill because it's not yet complete. And it won't be ready unless and until I benefit from the involvement of all of you. And I humbly ask that you invite me to join your conversations I'm not sure what happened, folks.
Unmute yourself if you can hear me.
I can hear you now.
Thank y'all. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I still hear an echo. Thank you so much. All right. Rep, do you have a 60-second version of what you just said that you can tell us how we can support Rep Rab's introduction of a reparations bill in the State House in Pennsylvania? So can you just tell us about that and how we might support you? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I am working on a state-based reparations bill that would provide reparations for Black Pennsylvanians. Thank you. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I am working on a state-based reparations bill that would provide reparations for Black Pennsylvanians. Thank you. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. I am working on a state-based reparations bill that would provide reparations for Black Pennsylvanians.
Rep, do you have the live stream up and playing in front of you?
I do not.
Okay.
I'm on Zoom.
Keep going.
All right. My bill would address the complicity of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, its government and court system on the subjugation of Black people. And I need your help. I haven't introduced it, even though I've circulated it 3 years ago. And I don't want to do that until I've gotten your input from your congregations, your communities. This is more than a study. I seek to create a quasi-governmental, autonomous, and independent, fully funded authority that would invest in Black communities with taxpayer dollars. This does not obviate the responsibility of corporations to pay reparations, or the city of Philadelphia, or religious orders, or universities. But as a state lawmaker, I feel compelled to make sure that there are reparations coming from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for its complicity in white supremacy and anti-Black racism, not the least of which was slavery. So I encourage all of you to join me. You can go to reprab.com and find out how to be involved. And I can come to your communities and listen to your concerns, as there are many of us on the front lines. And I find great import in what you have to say in terms of influencing this forthcoming legislation.
Thank you so much, Rep Rab, for being willing to tell the truth in the State House. Thank you so much for joining us. Y'all, we had to cut the live stream, and that's what allowed us to hear Rep Rab more clearly. So apologies about that. We're going to start the live stream again. Let's welcome up Scott Stevens and Christ Glory. Thank you all so much.
Praise God, everybody. Come on, can we just hear a praise to our God? And today we're going to sing songs of freedom, so you can join in with us. Praise the Lord. Come on, let's put our hands together here and celebrate. If you have to, why don't you stand up and stretch out just a little bit? Come on, let's exercise our right to praise. Come on, let's give God the glory. We give you honor, we give you praise. So listen, I'm gonna clap my hands louder than before. Clap your hands. I'm gonna sing louder than before. Oh, I'm gonna jump and shout and praise. Come on, give him praise. I'm gonna lift my hand. Let me see you lift your hand. Let's worship. Come on, shout freedom. Freedom. We got it. Freedom. Yeah. Freedom. We'll share it. Freedom. 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 on. I'm gonna clap my hands louder. Clap, clap, clap your hands. I'm gonna celebrate the King of Kings. Come on, worship. Hey. I'm gonna lift my hands higher and higher. I'm gonna give him my life today. Come on, child, and give him the praise. Freedom. Freedom. We got freedom. Yeah. Freedom. We'll share it. Freedom, freedom, freedom. He who the Son sets free is free indeed. Freedom, freedom. Come on, listen. No more shackles, no more chains, no more bondage. I am free. Yeah. Will you help me declare? Say no more shackles.
No more shackles, no more chains,
No more bondage.
no more bondage.
I am free. Yeah. If you've been free, come on, shout with me. Hallelujah.
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 We give you glory.
Hallelujah.
We magnify.
Hallelujah.
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 Come on, make noise. Come on, shout, shout, shout. Hallelujah.
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 Freedom, freedom,
Freedom.
we got it. Yeah.
Freedom.
I'll share it. Freedom, freedom, freedom. We know it. We'll show it. Free. Freedom, freedom, free. Now come on, let's give Jesus celebration.
Thank you, Lord.
The song just simply says glory. How many know that one day when the glory comes, it'll be ours? Come on, let's lift our hands in protest and celebration. Come on, come on. One day when the glory comes, it will be us. It will be us. One day when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. And then we'll cry glory.
Glory.
We'll cry glory.
Glory.
Glory, glory, glory.
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 We'll share glory.
Glory.
We'll declare glory.
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 Glory, glory. Come on.
Glory.
When it come to writing music, I've been seen as the best, but if you look me in my skin, would you see me as a threat? Would you see me as a person that be trying to show love? Or maybe you would feel safer if my hands were in cuffs, like what's up? An African American just trying to make some change. Since birth I've had the power and it's stored inside my name. But if there was a crime, I know they put me up for blame. It's crazy how the news the only way we gain some fame. When we gonna change? Why we shoot each other? Keep them bullets in the race. Oppression and recession, and they hate us cause our race. They trying to kill us off because the color of our face. No matter what it takes, we resilient, never quitting. Only place to go is up cause we want better living. Better listen to all these words that I'm spitting with these. In front of me is both some kings and queens.
One day when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. And then we'll shout out glory, glory. Come on, we will share glory.
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 Yeah, glory.
Glory.
Well, the war is not over. The victory isn't won. We'll fight on till we finish, until the day is done. And we will shout glory.
Glory.
We'll cry glory.
Glory.
We'll cry glory.
Glory.
Glory, 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 glory.
Glory.
Ladies gotta move with elegance while taking it higher. Fellas gotta stay strong, ain't no break when we tired. We was born with a purpose, so we came to aspire. That's why every song I write, I plan on making it fire. We can't fight against each other, adding flame to the fire. Time to douse that. Black lives matter to my grave, I'ma shout that. Getting stepped on, they must think that we'll allow that. They gonna be surprised when we hit them with the bounce back. Bounce back, we gon' hit them with the bounce back. You gotta be ready when they ask, are you about that? No longer can we be treated like a bunch of outcasts. Will I ever fold under the pressure? Yeah, I doubt that. Yeah, you know we never quitting. Only place to go is up, cause we want better living. Better listen to all these words that I'm spitting with these. In front of me is both some kings and queens, yeah.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be us. It will be yours. Then we'll shout glory.
Glory.
Come on, lift your hand, glory.
Glory.
We need the glory of the Lord. Let the glory.
Glory.
We'll take glory.
Glory.
We need glory.
Glory.
Ooh. Say glory.
Glory.
Come on, let's give God praise.
Hallelujah.
One more time for Scott Stevens in Christ's glory. One, two. Thanks so much for your time and attention. We're almost at the conclusion of this event. Coming up next is the Muslim call to confession and Muslim demand for reparations. Aziz Nathu, interfaith minister and member of the Mayor's Commission on Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs, followed by Asiya Jones, and then the Reverend Gray Maggiano. Please receive them in that order.
Not found in the textbooks. We put our fists high in
Please receive.
Is this on? Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be on y'all. My name is Aziz Nathu. I stand before you as a Muslim, a teacher, and a preacher, an immigrant, a son of Africa. I'm from East Africa. But most of all, as a warrior for justice, past and present. I'm here. Thank y'all. I'm here joining my voice with yours to confess that I bear witness that the unspeakable crime and injustice suffered by slaves in this country cannot be swept aside, and that the reparations owed to them and now to their descendants cannot be denied, and we demand that this country own up to its crimes against humanity and make restitution for a crime that is centuries old and the bill is way past due. I will also add that as a child of Africa, the reparations expand to the land, meaning Africa, from which its human capital and the treasure of its most productive workforce was brutally snatched and robbed of their freedom, of their dignity, of their culture, of their heritage, of their religion, and that crime and theft is yet to be fully acknowledged or compensated. Remember, 30 to 40% of the slaves were Muslims. All of Islamic ethics fit under the bookends of compassion and justice and everything in between. Let me share some quotes from our traditions. Our holy prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever among you sees evil, let him change it with his hand. And if he is unable to do so, then with his tongue. And if he is unable to do so, then with his heart." And that is the weakest of faith. In another instance, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was instructing the people to help their brother, whether that brother was an oppressor or whether he was oppressed or an oppressor. Upon being questioned, while it is understandable to help your brother who is being oppressed, how can we support our brother who is being the oppressor? And the response was by helping him walk away from his path of oppression. I will share a short story of our ancestor, the granddaddy of us all, Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, and the frog. Now this I have only found in our tradition, so I'm sure there's a variation somewhere. When the prophet of God, Abraham, was captured and was being set on fire by the idolaters, a little frog saw what was going on and said, "I cannot remain inactive," and started jumping between a pool of water and the feet of the Holy Prophet and depositing mouthfuls of water. And the other animals started laughing at the frog and says, "What difference are you going to make with your little gulps of water?" And the frog says, "In the grand scheme of things, not a whole lot. But on the day of judgment, when my Lord asks me, what did I do when I saw injustice? I will say I did my part, and I will stand before God with dignity. I did whatever was within my capability." The evil of slavery was injustice and a moral sin, and the resistance to repay this debt is past due. This past due debt is injustice compounded. And a debt that is long past due, remember, we do not seek charity, we just seek justice. And they will say, "We do not have the resources," or "If we pay out so much, we will go bankrupt." Well, you are already bankrupt. You are morally bankrupt. It is a lack of moral will, not a lack of resource. Our brother Dave just mentioned, cut the damn check. A casual glance at the bloated military budget and our addiction to endless wars and weapons will reveal that the resources are plentiful, but they are dominated by the military, industrial, war machine complex. We gotta tell some truth today, y'all. As people of faith, we know that all it takes for evil to succeed is for good people to do nothing. So we ask you to examine your moral compass and add your voice for justice, since your silence is complicit in perpetuating and delaying this centuries-old injustice. With sin comes a moral duty for redemption, and we plead for your support to pluck up the courage of the frog and demand justice. I will end with a quote from the great Muslim poet Rumi. For those who feel that they cannot make any difference, Rumi said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean contained in a single drop. So combine your drop with other drops, make ripples, and join forces and make waves and come together to form a tsunami of justice and demand for reparations, inshallah, God willing." Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Hello, salam everyone. My name is Asia Jones. I am the Youth Leadership and Advocacy Projects Coordinator at CARE Philadelphia. I'm 22 years old, African-American Muslim, born and raised in Philly, and born and raised Muslim. Although I have only been alive for 22 years, only the past 1 to 2 years, if even, have been the first time I have heard of Juneteenth even being acknowledged. I was speaking to my grandma about the fact that through all the fighting for justice that they did, my great-great-grandparents and even my great-grandparents would have never believed that America would see a black president or a day like Juneteenth even being recognized. As grateful as we can be for the acknowledgement of Juneteenth, we must remember that acknowledgement is not even a pinch of what black Americans deserve. We may have had steps in the right direction, but as we have seen, America has a long history of giving people a sprinkle to hide the long history of injustices that they need to be covered up. Having a holiday doesn't make up for or excuse the amount of lives that have been taken over the years. From Emmett Till to George Floyd to the many before, between, and after them, to the recent shooting in Buffalo that made the headlines for maybe all of a week, we are constantly reminded that even when we think we are moving forward, every day the thought of being black in America is a threat, and at any moment our lives can be in danger. And truthfully, it wasn't until the protests began to go on that we demanded change that the government took that and only gave us a holiday. The protests and the Black Lives Matter movement have allowed people to come together from all faiths and backgrounds to stand up against injustice and inequalities black Americans in this country face every day. In the Quran, Surah An-Nisa, which is the 4th Surah, verse 135 states, "O you who believe, stand with justice as a witness to God, even if it is against yourself, your parents, or close relatives, whether one is rich or poor, Allah, God, is worthy of both." As Muslims, in the beginning of our holy book, it emphasizes the importance of justice for all, and as Muslims, we must stand up for matters affecting ourselves and others, as justice is a priority. I have been blessed and privileged with many opportunities as a young person, just getting started with my life, leaning on faith as a part of why I do what I do. I recently graduated with my master's in public health, and through the education, I have continuously learned about the many injustices and systemic racism that has disproportionately affected black Americans, from access to quality health, education, and generational trauma. My goal has been to take what I learned and bring it back to my community. Being an African American Muslim means every day you're fighting 3 battles of discrimination. Whether we realize it or not, one of those identifiers is a target in someone's eyes. For me personally, it's been hard when you can't identify as African because you don't know which part your ancestors are from. You identify as Muslim, but because you're not from the Middle East, you're a convert, and you barely can identify as an American because no one believes that the black girl with the hijab is more native to this country than a Chad at Temple. After reflecting on what I could say today, one of the first things that came to my mind was a conversation as African American Muslims me and my friends get asked the most. It starts off with a, "Where are you from?" And I'll reply, "Philly." Then they're like, "No, like originally." And I'll enter my fake laugh here and once again say Philly. And then they go, "No, like where are your parents from?" And again, I say Philly. And so are my grandparents and probably their parents, and who knows, maybe we've been here for about 100 years. After resolve the question, "Where are you from?" then I'll get the, "Oh, so you converted?" question, in which I have to explain that I was born Muslim, born and raised Muslim, same with my parents, and it was my grandparents who had reverted. Although it took a while, movements and organizations fought to bring Islam back to African Americans, because before we had freedom of religion, there were approximately 1/3 of enslaved Africans who were Muslim but stripped of their religion, among other unimaginable things. As Muslims, I am making the call that all these crimes are self-evident, and my demand for reparations will not be taken from me. Having conversations like these and holidays such as Juneteenth are a small step, but a huge step in acknowledging and combating a larger problem. As I approach my way into the world as a young African American woman, I'm weighed down by the realization that the treasures stolen from my ancestors are still not being returned to my people because those who are in power refuse to pay the debt. The Constitution addresses us as people, but us as we are the people, but seems some are more privileged and some are more underprivileged than others. Islam emphasizes justice and it discourages debt. Those in power may be great, but Allah or God is greater, and to him we rely. Thank you.
You're leaving before the best part. I'm just kidding. My name is Gray Majano. We gotta be real close to this, right? Okay. My name is Gray Maggiano. I'm the rector of Memorial Episcopal Church in Baltimore, and I want to thank the Reverend Naomi for inviting me up here. Truthfully, when she reached out, I was like, are there no white male Episcopalians in Philadelphia? But looking at the room, no, there's not, apparently. I want to say two things because you guys are really serious about this stuff because you're still here. And the first is a book club is not reparations. The second is there need to be more people that look like me up here. So if you're a white man and you're sitting in the pews, or do you call them pews, chair, I don't know what, benches? This is very territorial kind of stuff. If you call them, then I want you to figure out how you get up here, how you become a leader in your community towards reparations. And a lot of you are not white men, but you might be married to white men, or eat with white men, or hang out with white men, and get them to be involved. Now, Episcopalians are not, strictly speaking, revival people. We're more like high tea people. So I'm not going to bring the same fire and furor that you brought, Bishop. But I want to say four things let me start from the beginning. Our church committed in 2021 $500,000 towards reparations. That's about 120% of our annual budget and about the same amount of our endowment. It's money we did not have, but we knew existed in our community. And we did that for a couple reasons. First, we learned that our church was built by 2 slave-owning priests, but that wasn't enough to get the reparations started. And then we learned that in the 1950s, they actually fired a priest like me who tried to integrate the church, but that wasn't enough. And then we learned that there was a priest there for 45, then we learned the first 9 priests at the church, 8 of them fought for or supported the Confederacy. So that takes us to like 1929, but that wasn't enough. And then we learned that the first housing segregation ordinance in the country that became the model for how to segregate neighborhoods across the country that led to redlining was written in our parish hall. But that wasn't enough to get us to reparations. What it took was our deacon looking up at a plaque as she gets a call from her brother saying, we just learned that our family was enslaved by Charles Ridgely Howard at Hampton Plantation. And the plaque she looked up at said Charles Ridgely Howard. But our deacon was enslaved by the founders of our church. And that the founders' descendants are also members of the church, which made coffee hour a little awkward. But so that's what it took. And I'm saying that it can't take that much, because not everyone's going to have that story. And I'm grateful that we've been able to take this journey and make this transition. But all that other stuff should have kickstarted this long ago. All those other realities should have kickstarted this long ago. All right, so 2021, we commit $500,000 to reparations, and that's January 2021. By February 2021, we realized we had no idea what we were doing. And I learned 4 important things about reparations that I want to share with you, and then I'm going to stop talking. And they have to do with power. Someone talked about power earlier. With relationship, which we heard about earlier. The best part about coming last is everyone's already said the stuff you were going to say. Power, relationship, humility, and justice. So I'm going to start with humility. We started and said, well, in the past, our church committed sins in 4 particular areas: housing, voting rights, environmental justice, and education. So those are the 4 areas we're going to focus on. And then we got a bunch of local organizations together with black leaders from our neighborhoods and said, this is what we're going to do. And they said, well, where's criminal justice? And we said, well, we didn't do that. And they laughed. Because, of course, all that stuff that we did led to the imprisonment of black bodies, to making it illegal to be black on the streets of Baltimore. So we had to start over. Now, that was embarrassing. But if I'm not willing to be humble and admit that I don't know how to do this, and I'm going to make mistakes, then I'm just doing exactly what you said. I'm repeating the same processes in the past that will continue to damage and hurt and enslave people in our communities. So humility is so important. Now what about power? There's an important distinction between power and responsibility here that I want to talk about, because we thought, well, we should just give this committee we put together of parish members and community members and give them responsibility to manage these funds. And they said, no, no, no. Because if we give people the responsibility to manage the funds and they don't manage the funds the way we want them managed, then we can say, well, see, we tried, but they just couldn't do it. Now, Baltimore City did the same thing. We started a youth fund, $12 million to support youth in Baltimore City. But they gave that money to an organization that did not have previous experience managing that amount of money. And it's not the organization's fault, but it is the city's fault. Because then they could blame the organization for not doing anything and take the money back and also not do anything. So it's not about passing on responsibility. It's about handing over power to somebody else. All right, so I said humility, power, relationships. What was the fourth one I said? Justice. Justice should be self-explanatory, but it's not. All right? Just like a book club is not reparations, a soup kitchen is not reparations. A food pantry is not reparations. Not that we shouldn't do those things, but if we're not changing the reality that makes the food pantry necessary, it's not reparations. If we're not changing there's people say, in Baltimore, kids got to beat the odds to get out of West Baltimore. If we're not changing the odds, it's not reparations. Lastly, relationship. Now, when I got to Baltimore in 2016, I was coming to this congregation in a neighborhood that's about 50% black-white, in a broader city that's 65, 70% black, and the congregation that's told me they've been committed to social justice for 50 years. So I expect to walk in and have a pretty diverse congregation. So what do you think it looked like? Oh, we had 7. And so that bothered me. And so that's kind of what began a lot of this work, was this question of why do black people not want to come to this church? Don't answer that, please, Bishop. But what we learned in all of this was 2 things. One, our history as a white supremacist racist institution for 100 years before those 50 good years was still alive in people's minds. But the other part was that in that 100 years, all these really strong black religious institutions had built up in Baltimore City. And if I wanted to appease my own ego and make my congregation more diverse and went and stole all their parishioners to come to my church, that's just another form of colonialism. It's just doing the same thing again. So instead of trying to say, well, we're going to be more diverse, we said we need to change how we operate. We need to change how we represent ourselves in the community. We need to change how we function as an institution. So when people do come in those doors, they may see a place that's more comfortable for them. But more importantly, so that we can be in relationship with all these other churches and all these other communities, all these other institutions in the community. So the first year I was there, I began to make some friends, and I was invited to preach the 7 Last Words service at Sharp Street United Methodist Church. And I was like, well, okay. So they said, we're going to be short this year. Everyone can only preach 15 minutes. So I was like, well, I'll go for like 12, 13. I was the 5th word. It'd been going on about 3.5 hours by the time it got to me. And so again, it's humility. It's recognizing that we don't know how to do this as white people. And that's okay. And if you mess up, just apologize. Because people are pretty forgiving. We're all, brothers and sisters in Christ, and we all believe in the same God. We all worship the same deity, no matter what tradition we're coming from. Just say, I messed up. I'm sorry. Because that's a way to develop relationship. So as you're going out to practice reparations, because you're all going to do that, right? No book clubs. You read all the books, all right? Buy the books, but don't read them. I want you to remember to be humble, to give up power, to seek justice, and to build relationship. Amen.
Listen, you were given a little color-coded sheet of paper when you came in the room. Hopefully you were given. If you weren't, we have it electronically, so you'll get it. We want you to take one next faithful step. Okay? Oh, it's behind me. Thank you, Saptarshi. Shout out to Saptarshi Dutt, who has been trying to manage the technical stuff from behind the scenes. You have 5 opportunities to stay connected to the work of reparations. Remember, we said at the top that we are becoming reparations people. And that means living a reparations lifestyle. 5 opportunities. If you take a picture of the QR code, or you know how to do it, pull up your camera, point toward the QR code, it'll open a link and tell you all about how to do the thing listed on the paper. All right? So you got 5 opportunities. Go ahead and take a picture of it now. If you don't have it, take a picture of the wall. And you can, the directions to open the QR code is at the bottom in case you need some help on your device. All right? Then on the back of that, you have what's called the Reparationist Pledge of Accountability. Dr. Dave Ragland and team at the Grassroots Reparations Campaign, it invites you to affirm this. This is your commitment. All right? All right, we're not going to have time to say it together as a group. Take a picture, take a picture, take a picture, take a picture. We will send this to you electronically, so you'll have it in your phone, in your laptop. You can print it out if you want. Post it everywhere you go. All right? Take one step. That's the invitation. All right? We're going to close. I'm so grateful. If I start calling names, I'm going to miss somebody. So I'm just going to say thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. The Salt Trails Collective, Philly's own, is a group of brave souls who are trying to stir up possibility by stirring up grief. Because we can't heal what we can't feel. And sometimes what we need to feel is sadness, is lamentation that we're here today talking about reparations. That means something got broke and we need to fix it. So I'm going to invite Megan and Nyla and Amy up from the Salt Trails Collective. Give them a hand. They're going to take us to the close. They're going to take us to the close with a final ritual. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all for sticking with us and being here. I know there's so much that we have acknowledged and named and called forth today in our testimony and our bearing witness and our calls to confession and to action. And as we look back to build forward and as we confront to transform and as we engage together in this incredibly vital and powerful work, just like Reverend Naomi said, we also have to acknowledge that part of our collective healing requires our collective grieving and taking an honest look at what cannot be repaired, retrieved, recovered, what has been irretrievably lost to slavery. We have to name those losses and to make space for our grief. And so this is going to be a moment to feel into that, to notice what may be stirring in you, to notice what may have risen to the surface as you listen today, whether that's sorrow, rage, longing, despair, the many faces of grief, whatever is sitting for you right now as you reflect on this country's long-standing pact with white supremacy. And so I'm going to lead us in a brief meditation to help you tap into that. And whatever comes up for you, I just invite you to let that surface. And if you feel comfortable, to name it out loud. And as we lament together, Amy and Megan are going to be filling this pot with dirt as an honoring not only of the stolen indigenous land upon which we stand, this land that supports us and nurtures us and gives us so much, but also as a symbol of fertility and possibility, of the growth of all the new hopes and the dreams that we are seeding and making space for as we also make space for our grief. So to begin this meditation, I just invite you to plant your feet firmly on the floor. Just really take a moment to feel your feet on the ground and notice that rooted connection to the earth and how you are being supported and held by Mother Earth in this moment. Just taking a moment to anchor into that. And then as you take a breath, I invite you to draw that energy in. Allow it to move through you, centering you even more in this grounding earth energy. And if you haven't already done so, and if it feels safe for you, I invite you to close your eyes, or you can gently lower your gaze. Just allow yourself to take another deep breath, filling your belly with air and releasing it. And just another breath, letting your belly expand on the inhale, contract on the exhale, and continuing to breathe this way for just a few more moments. Noticing as you do so where you might feel any sensation in your body. That could present as tightness, as heat, tingling. Just noticing where you might feel some sensation and be able to relax a little more and soften your muscles. And then I invite you to bring your attention to your chest area, which houses not only our hearts, but our lungs, which is where we hold and carry our grief. And I just invite you to notice what is present for you in this area. If it helps you to do so, you might want to put a hand on your chest, but just noticing what's there. Whether it's a shape, a sound, a color, a feeling, the impulse to tears, maybe the sensation of fire. Whatever it is, to just keep breathing into it, letting it be whatever it wants to be. No need to understand or do this right. Just breathing and noticing where grief has made a home in your body. And then allowing this question to arise. What has been lost that can never be recovered? What can never be repaired? One of the things that comes to mind for me are the ruptured bonds between mothers and the children who never got to belong to them because they were enslaved at birth. And so those family ties are lost. And those histories are lost due to unrecognized kinship. And so just notice, what is coming up for you? What are you grieving that can never be returned? And if you feel comfortable doing so, I invite you to begin naming those losses out loud. You may keep your eyes closed. You may keep your hand on your heart. Just noticing what's there and naming it as you feel comfortable. Just keep breathing. As the dirt is poured, as the bowl chimes our laments, noticing if your breath has shifted in some way, if there's a sound that wants to accompany the bowl, if there's a sound that wants to accompany your breath, whether it's a moan, a grunt, a wail, a roar, any of it is welcome. And continue to name what's there, what's rising up for you in this moment. What are you sitting with in your grief in this moment? And so holding what has been named and what hasn't, holding what still may be making its way to the surface, maybe not in this moment, maybe not even today, but holding all of these losses, I invite you to just bring your attention gently back to your chest, drawing in a deep breath and maybe releasing it with an audible sigh. And again, deep breath, audible exhale. Noticing if there's maybe a little more lightness or space in your chest. And if there isn't, that's okay. But just bringing your curiosity to what might feel different or what might have shifted for you. And taking one more deep breath, I invite you to imagine that you are blowing that breath into the dirt, into the soil, the earth, releasing your heaviness to the earth that supports and sustains us. And as you feel ready, you may gently open your eyes.
Thank you, Nyla. I want to speak a little bit more to this beautiful dirt imbued with your prayers, both spoken and unspoken. And if the earth teaches us anything, it's that death gives way to life, always. So we have some seeds here, some watermelon seeds. From these small little seeds can grow a huge melon to feed lots of people. And so it is our dream that every word spoken here today grow as abundant and nurture all of our communities just like this watermelon. These seeds that we add here today to this dirt imbued with your prayers are going to be planted here in Philly at the London Legacy Garden, where a friend of ours, Dominique London, has managed to actually secure her family's land and is creating something so beautiful and enduring for the community. And we have another packet of seeds here, also imbued with your prayers in the presence of everything today, that if any of you would like to take some home to your gardens, to your communities, we encourage you to do so. It is an incredible privilege to share this space and this dream with all of you. So thank you for letting us be here today.
Come on, say, let the people sing, eh, eh. Let the people say, let the people say, amen, amen, amen. Amen just means let this be so. And so we're leaving saying amen. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so, so much. And we'll see y'all later.